In a gleaming fortress of code and ambition, where tech titans wield algorithms like weapons, a silent cyberattack cripples an empire, and the only one who can save it is a 10-year-old girl, unnoticed, her genius hidden in a frayed notebook. While executives panic and screens go dark, she sees patterns where others see chaos, unraveling a digital vendetta that threatens to erase everything. How can a child outsmart a hacker's wrath? Dive into this electrifying tale of brilliance in the shadows. Like, share, and subscribe to uncover stories that ignite your curiosity. Let's begin. In the heart of Seattle's tech district, where glass towers pierce the slate-gray sky, NexGen Solutions stood as a monument to ambition. Its marble lobby alive with the pulse of innovation, sharp clicks of heels, the low hum of encrypted deals, and the soft glow of screens displaying algorithms that could reshape industries. 10-year-old Emma Carter sat tucked into a corner on a cushioned bench, her small frame nearly swallowed by an oversized green hoodie, its cuffs frayed from nights spent twisting wires and soldering circuits. Her backpack, patched with duct tape, rested beside her, guarding her most precious possession, a worn notebook filled with sketches of circuit boards and half-written code, each page a testament to her self-taught brilliance. Emma wasn't supposed to be here, not really. Her mother, Sarah Carter, a 34-year-old janitor with calloused hands and a quiet resilience, brought her along because childcare was a luxury they couldn't afford. Sarah moved through the lobby with practiced invisibility, her cleaning cart gliding silently across the polished floor, her eyes fixed downward to avoid the gazes of NexGen's elite. Emma, though, watched everything, her hazel eyes darting from the security guard's bored slouch to the hurried strides of executives clutching tablets. She counted the tiles, 47 from her bench to the elevator, her mind always mapping, always calculating, as if the world were a puzzle she could solve with enough patience. At home, in their cramped apartment, Emma had turned their tiny living room into a laboratory, scavenging broken radios and old phones from alleyways, coaxing them back to life with a butter knife and sheer determination. She'd once fixed her cousin's game console, its circuits fried from a power surge, while he watched in awe, calling her the tech whisperer. Now, as she sat in NexGen's lobby, her pencil scratched furiously across her notebook, sketching a device that could sync signals wirelessly, an idea sparked by a late-night YouTube tutorial she'd watched on a library computer. Her mother had taught her to stay unseen, to blend into the background, but Emma's mind was a riot of color and possibility, too loud to be contained. She glanced at Sarah, who was wiping down a glass panel, her movements deliberate, almost reverent, as if cleaning were a ritual to keep the world at bay. Emma's heart tugged. She knew Sarah worked double shifts to keep them afloat, her dreams buried under years of exhaustion. "Stay put, Emma. Floor 22 today," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the lobby's hum. Emma nodded, her eyes flicking back to her notebook. "Got it, Mom," she replied, her tone soft but steady, already lost in her sketch. The security guard, a burly man named Tom, glanced at Sarah, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Same shift, Carter?" he asked, his eyes sliding past Emma as if she were part of the furniture. "Always," Sarah answered, her smile tight, her hands tightening on the cart's handle. Emma didn't mind being ignored. It was a game she'd mastered, turning invisibility into a shield. She flipped to a new page, her pencil tracing a circuit that could, in theory, talk to satellites, an idea she'd never shared with anyone, not even Sarah. Her world was one of patterns and possibilities, where broken things held secrets waiting to be unlocked. She thought of the night she'd hacked into a coding forum on a borrowed laptop, its screen flickering but alive, and found a thread that made her heart race, a discussion about rewriting system protocols, not to destroy, but to understand. That was her fuel, understanding, not just fixing. As she sketched, the lobby's rhythm faltered. A screen above the reception desk flickered, then went black. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, phones buzzing like angry bees. Emma's pencil paused, her ears catching a single word, breach, hissed like a curse by a woman in a sharp blazer. Voices rose, sharp and frantic. "The servers are down," a man shouted, slamming his tablet onto the counter. "Today of all days." Emma's gaze darted to a young intern, James Torres, 22, his tie slightly crooked, his face pale as he muttered into his phone. "No, I don't know why the DNS is offline. It's the merger pitch, we're screwed." Emma's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the spark of recognition. She'd seen this before, not in real life, but in a simulation she'd stumbled across on that same coding forum. A mock cyberattack that locked systems in a recursive loop. Her fingers tightened around her pencil, her mind racing through the possibilities. Was it a virus? A targeted hack? She leaned forward, her small frame tense, as a woman in a tailored suit sprinted across the lobby, barking, "The remote failsafe stead, we're blind." Emma's breath caught. She knew what a failsafe was, had read about them in a discarded tech manual. Her eyes flicked to her notebook, where she'd jotted notes about packet overflows, a concept she'd pieced together from scraps of knowledge. She whispered to herself, "It's not random, it's a pattern." James, pacing nearby, caught her words, his head snapping toward her. "What did you say, kid?" he asked, his voice sharp but curious, not dismissive. Emma froze, her rule flashing in her mind. Don't speak, don't be seen. But the problem pulled at her, a puzzle begging to be solved. "The packet relay," she said, louder, her voice steady despite the heat rising to her cheeks. "It's looping the system into a freeze." James blinked, his phone forgotten in his hand. "How do you know that?" he asked, stepping closer, his dark eyes searching hers. Emma hesitated, her fingers curling around her notebook. I've seen it before, on a forum. It's like a trap, but it leaves a trail." The lobby's chaos swirled around them, but for a moment, it was just Emma and James, a girl with a secret and an intern who dared to listen. Above them, the screen stayed dark, NexGen's empire teetering on the edge of collapse. Emma's heart pounded. She wasn't supposed to be here, wasn't supposed to speak, but the problem was calling her, and she knew she could answer. Could a girl no one noticed become the one to save a tech giant? And what would happen when Nathan Reed, the iron-willed CEO watching from the shadows, realized a child held the key to his empire's survival? The answer lies ahead, a story of brilliance breaking through the silence, waiting to unfold. The command center of NexGen Solutions pulsed with a frenetic energy, its glass walls reflecting the glow of flickering monitors and the strained faces of engineers hunched over keyboards. The air crackled with tension, a symphony of tapping keys, muttered curses, and the low hum of cooling fans, struggling to keep up with overheating servers. The girl sat silently at her bench, her notebook open to a page of jagged lines and cryptic symbols, her small hands twitching with the urge to act. Her mother was still on the 22nd floor, oblivious to the storm unfolding below, her cleaning cart gliding through empty offices. The girl's heart thudded, not from the chaos, but from the puzzle unfolding before her. A cyber attack that wasn't just breaking the system, but rewriting it, like a novel with hidden chapters only she could read. She'd never touched a corporate terminal, but her mind was already mapping the breach's architecture, piecing together fragments from late-night experiments with scavenged hardware. The room buzzed with voices, each one sharper than the last, as engineers threw out theories, ransomware, phishing, insider sabotage, none landing close to the truth. She saw it differently. The attack was a conversation, a deliberate challenge etched in code, daring someone to respond. The young intern, his tie now loosened, stood near a monitor, his fingers drumming nervously against his thigh. He glanced at her, his earlier curiosity now tinged with desperation. "They're saying it's a zero-day exploit," he said, his voice low, almost to himself. "No one's seen this before." She tilted her head, her pencil scratching a new pattern in her notebook, a spiral that mimicked the system's looping failure. "It's not new," she murmured, her voice cutting through the din. "It's old code, dressed up, like putting a new skin on a broken engine." He turned fully now, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean, old?" he asked, stepping closer, ignoring the engineer beside him, who scoffed. "Great, now we're taking tech history lessons from a kid." She didn't flinch, her eyes fixed on her sketch. "It's using a backdoor from a protocol nobody uses anymore," she said, her tone steady, almost distant. "Something from the early 2000s, before cloud systems. I saw it in a manual once at a thrift store. It's like a ghost in the wiring." The room didn't stop, but a few heads turned. A woman with short-cropped hair and a tablet clutched like a shield paused her typing. "A legacy protocol?" she asked, her voice sharp but edged with curiosity. "We phased those out years ago." The girl nodded, her fingers tracing the spiral in her notebook. "Not all of them. There's always a piece left behind, like a crack in a wall. Someone found it and built a key." The woman's eyes narrowed, but she didn't dismiss her. Instead, she tapped her tablet, pulling up a diagnostic log. "Show me," she said, her tone a challenge. The girl hesitated, her mother's warning echoed in her mind. "Stay out of trouble." But the puzzle was louder, its pieces clicking into place like a lock she'd already half opened. She stood, her sneakers silent against the tile, and approached the terminal, her notebook clutched like a talisman. The intern followed, hovering like a guard who didn't know his role. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice low, glancing at the engineers now watching with the mix of annoyance and intrigue. "I'm not guessing," she replied, her eyes scanning the screen's error codes, red warnings blinking like a heartbeat. She recognized the structure, not from school, not from any teacher, but from nights spent dissecting code on a borrowed tablet, its battery held together with rubber bands. The breach wasn't chaos, it was choreography, each move calculated to mislead. She pointed at a line of code, a string of commands buried in a log file. "There," she said. "It's rerouting traffic through a dead port. Nobody checks those because they're supposed to be obsolete." The woman with the tablet leaned in, her skepticism wavering. "How do you even know what a dead port is?" she asked, her voice softer now, almost respectful. The girl's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I fixed a router once. It was in a dumpster. Same trick, different scale." A senior engineer, his glasses fogged from stress, snorted from across the room. "So we're trusting a kid who plays with trash?" He snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. His eyes darted to the screen, where her finger still pointed. The intern stepped forward, his voice firm. "She's not wrong," he said. "Look at the log. That port's active, and it shouldn't be." The room shifted, the air grew heavier as the engineers exchanged glances. The girl didn't notice. Her world had narrowed to the terminal, its blinking cursor a talon she couldn't resist. She typed a single command, her fingers steady despite the weight of a dozen stares. The screen flickered, a diagnostic tool unfreezing for the first time in hours. A murmur rippled through the room, not relief but disbelief. "She accessed the log," the woman whispered, her tablet forgotten. "How?" The girl didn't answer, her focus absolute, her mind racing through the system's layers. She saw the breacher's pattern now, a deliberate knot, tied by someone who knew NexGen's weaknesses better than its own team. Her thoughts darkened as she worked. This wasn't just a hack, it was personal, a grudge woven into every line of code. She'd felt this before, not in the system but in herself. The need to prove something to a world that didn't look twice. Whoever did this wasn't just breaking in. They were shouting, demanding to be heard. Her fingers paused, a chill running through her. What if this wasn't about destruction, but about being seen? She pushed the thought aside, typing faster, her heart pounding with a mix of thrill and dread. The intern leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "You're in deeper than anyone's been. What's next?" She glanced at him, her eyes sharp, unguarded. "Find the key. It's hidden in plain sight, but it's not for us. It's for someone like me." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. The puzzle wasn't just a problem, it was a mirror, reflecting a mind as sharp and unseen as her own. The command center's glass walls seemed to close in, the air thick with the acrid scent of overheated circuits and the sharp edge of desperation. The girl stood at the terminal, her small frame dwarfed by the towering screens, their red warnings pulsing like a warning heartbeat. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, not from uncertainty, but from a dawning realization that the breach she was unraveling wasn't just a technical assault. It was a story, a vendetta coded in whispers and traps. The engineers around her, their faces etched with fatigue, watched in uneasy silence, their earlier skepticism now fractured by her uncanny precision. The intern, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and anxiety, stood close, his notebook forgotten on a nearby desk. The system's architecture sprawled before her, a labyrinth of corrupted data and false pathways, each one designed to mislead, to exhaust, to defeat. But she saw through it, her mind slicing through the chaos like a blade through fog. She'd never been in a room this important, never had so many eyes on her, but the weight of their stares was nothing compared to the puzzle's pull. This wasn't just about saving a company, it was about answering a challenge only she could hear. She typed a command, her fingers steady, pulling up a hidden log buried deep in the system's substructure. The screen flickered, revealing a string of code that seemed innocuous, but hummed with intent. It was a decoy, a lure meant to trap the careless, but she recognized its rhythm, its cadence. It reminded her of the time she'd rewired a broken alarm clock, its gears stripped, but its logic intact, ticking in a language only she understood. "It's a feint," she said, her voice low but clear, cutting through the room's tension. The woman with cropped hair, now standing at her shoulder, leaned in, her glasses reflecting the screen's glow. "A feint?" she asked, her tone sharp but curious. "You mean it's deliberate misdirection?" The girl nodded, her eyes never leaving the screen. "It's not hiding the breach, it's hiding the why," she said. "Someone wants us to chase the wrong thread." The intern shifted, his voice tight. "So what's the real target?" he asked, his fingers twitching as if he could grab the answer from the air. She didn't respond immediately, her mind diving deeper into the code's structure, following a trail that felt less like programming and more like a letter written in secret ink. The room's tension spiked as a new alert flashed across the main screen. A secondary lockout, this one targeting the company's financial backbone. Gasps rippled through the engineers. "That's the merger data," a man in the crumpled suit barked, his voice cracking. "If that goes, we're done." The girl's pulse quickened, but her hand stayed steady. She saw it now. The attack wasn't just about shutting down systems. It was about exposing vulnerabilities, stripping the company bare. Her mind flashed to a memory, not of code, but of a conversation with her cousin who'd once said, "People break things to show they can, not because they have to." This was that kind of break, a calculated wound. She typed faster, isolating the new lockout, but then she froze. A hidden signature flickered in the code, a single line, almost poetic. "For those who never saw." Her breath caught. It wasn't just the signature, it was a confession, a cry from someone who'd been ignored, just like her. The realization hit like a shockwave. The hacker wasn't a stranger. They were a shadow of her own path, someone who'd learned in darkness but turned their gift into a weapon, "Who wrote that?" the intern asked, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes locked on the screen. She shook her head, her throat tight. "Someone who knows this place. Someone who was here and left." The woman with glasses stiffened, her tablet slipping slightly in her hands. "An ex-employee?" she asked, her voice edged with suspicion. "How would you know?" The girl's fingers trembled for the first time, not from the code, but from the weight of what she'd found. "Because it's personal," she said, her voice soft but heavy. "It's not just code. It's anger." The room went still, the engineers exchanging uneasy glances. A senior tech, his tie undone, stepped forward, his voice gruff. "Anger. You're reading emotions in a hack," he demanded, but his tone wavered, as if he sensed she was right. She met his gaze, unflinching. "It's not just a hack. It's a story. And I know how it ends." The plot twisted as she dug deeper, uncovering a buried file labeled Eclipse Protocol. It wasn't part of NexGen system. It was a custom script, a digital landmine planted to trigger if anyone got too close. Her heart raced. This was the hacker's endgame, a failsafe to erase everything if the breach was solved. She hesitated, her fingers hovering, knowing one wrong move could wipe the company's data clean. The intern noticed her pause, his voice urgent. "What's wrong?" he asked, leaning closer, his breath catching. "It's a trap," she whispered, her eyes scanning the file structure. "If I break this, it could take everything down." The woman with glasses stepped back, her voice sharp. "Then stop. We'll call in specialists." But the girl shook her head, her resolution hardening. "No," she said. "They're counting on that. They want us to run." She typed a single line, a probe, and the screen flickered again, revealing a countdown. 10 minutes until total erasure. The room erupted in panic, voices overlapping, but she stayed focused, her mind racing through possibilities. She wasn't just fighting a system now. She was facing a mind that had walked her path and chosen destruction. "Why would they do this?" the intern asked, his voice breaking. She looked at him, her eyes fierce. "Because they stopped believing anyone would listen." The words hung heavy, a mirror to her own fears. She turned back to the terminal, her fingers flying, determined to prove them wrong. The command center's air was electric, thick with the metallic tang of overheating servers and the suffocating weight of a countdown clock ticking down on the main screen. 9 minutes until the Eclipse Protocol would erase NexGen Solutions' entire digital existence. The girl stood rooted at the terminal, her small hands poised over the keyboard, her eyes locked on the lines of code that danced like a taunting riddle. The room around her was a storm of chaos, engineers shouting commands, monitors flashing crimson, and the faint buzz of phones vibrating with frantic messages. Her heart pounded, not from the noise, but from the invisible presence she felt in the code, a mind that had crafted this trap with surgical precision. The Eclipse Protocol wasn't just a program, it was a final act of defiance, a digital scream from someone who'd been silenced. She saw it now. The hacker wasn't just attacking NexGen. They were testing her, daring her to step into their shadow and choose a different path. Her fingers moved, tracing the protocol structure, but every command she entered was met with a countermeasure, a wall of encryption that shifted like a living thing. She wasn't just navigating a system, she was dueling a ghost. The intern hovered at her side, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. "Can you stop it?" he asked, his voice tight with urgency, his eyes flicking to the countdown. 8 minutes. She didn't look at him, her focus absolute. "I can try," she said, her voice steady but laced with a tremor of doubt. It's like they knew someone would get this far. The woman with cropped hair, now sweating through her blazer, leaned over her shoulder, her voice sharp. "Knew? You're saying they planned for you." The girl's lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers pausing for a fraction of a second. "Not me," she said. "Someone who thinks like them." She typed a new command, bypassing a decoy layer, and the screen flickered, revealing a hidden prompt. a blank field waiting for input, like a locked door demanding a password. Her breath caught. This was no ordinary barrier. It was a challenge, a question only someone with her kind of mind could answer. The door to the command center swung open and the CEO stormed in, his presence like a cold front sweeping through the room. His tailored suit was immaculate, but his eyes burned with the fury that made the engineers shrink back. He built NexGen from nothing, his ambition forged in the ashes of a childhood spent in fixing broken dreams in a foster home. But now his empire teetered on the edge of collapse. He stopped short, his gaze locking onto the girl at the terminal, her small frame an anomaly in a room of credentialed experts. "Who authorized this?" he demanded, his voice low, cutting through the chaos like a blade. The senior engineer, his glasses now smudged, stammered, She's making progress, sir." The CEO's eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. "Progress? She's a child. Get her out." The intern stepped forward, his voice shaking but resolute. "She's closer than we've ever been," he said, planting himself between her and the approaching security guards, their radios crackling with orders. "She found their trap. None of us did." The girl barely registered the argument. Her world narrowed to the prompt on the screen. She typed a string of code, not a password, but a message. "I hear you. Why this?" It was a gamble, a leap into the unknown, reaching out to the hacker's mind through the only language they shared. The room held its breath, the countdown ticking to 7 minutes. The screen blinked and a response appeared. "Because they forgot us." A collective gasp rippled through the engineers. The woman with glasses whispered, "She's talking to them." The girl's heart raced. The hacker wasn't just a shadow. They were real, watching, waiting. She typed again, her fingers trembling but deliberate. "You don't have to break it. Show me who you are." The screen froze, then flickered, revealing a single name. Lila Voss. The intern sucked in a breath. Voss. She was a developer here, fired 2 years ago for leaking internal memos. The CEO's face darkened, a flicker of recognition crossing his features, not just professional but personal. Lila had been his protege, a brilliant coder who challenged his decisions, her idealism clashing with his pragmatism until he'd cut her loose. The girl didn't know Lila's story, but she felt her pain in the code, a wound that had festered into vengeance. She typed again, "This won't fix it. Let me help." The countdown paused at 6 minutes, the screen pulsing as if the system itself were holding its breath. A new message appeared. "Prove you're different." The girl's mind raced, her fingers flying as she wove a counterscript, not to disable the protocol, but to redirect its energy, turning the trap into a bridge. The room watched, silent, as the screen shifted, green lines creeping into the crimson warnings. The CEO stepped closer, his voice softer now, almost haunted. "What are you doing?" he asked, his eyes fixed on her hands, which moved with a grace that reminded him of someone he'd lost long ago, a foster sister who taught him to see potential in broken things. The girl didn't look up. "I'm giving her a way out," she said, her voice firm. "She doesn't want to destroy everything. She wants to be heard." The intern leaned in, his voice urgent. "Can you do it in time?" he asked, glancing at the clock. 5 minutes. She nodded, her focus unshakable. "I have to," she said, her words carrying the weight of a vow. The screen flashed again. Lila's final message. "You're like me. Don't let them break you." Her throat tightened, but she pushed forward, her code weaving a path through the protocol's core, not to erase it, but to unlock it, to show Lila there was another way. The countdown slowed, the system's heartbeat flickering back to life. The room exhaled. But the girl knew this wasn't the end. Lila was still out there, and the choice she'd made would echo beyond the screen. The command center was a cathedral of quiet triumph, the screens now glowing with steady green pulses, the Eclipse Protocol disarmed like a storm that had spent its fury. The girl stepped back from the terminal, her small hands trembling not from fear, but from the weight of what she'd done. She hadn't just saved a system, she'd reached across a digital void and touched a stranger's pain. The countdown clock was frozen at 3 minutes, its red digits a fading echo of the crisis. The engineers stood in stunned silence, their faces a mix of relief and disbelief, their earlier skepticism replaced by a reverence they couldn't articulate. The intern, his tie now a crumpled knot, exhaled shakily, his eyes fixed on the girl as if seeing her for the first time. The woman with cropped hair clutched her tablet, her knuckles white, whispering to no one in particular. She did it. She actually did it. But the girl's gaze lingered on the screen, where Leela Voss's final message still lingered like a ghost. You're like me. Don't let them break you. Her heart twisted. She'd answered Leela's challenge, but the victory felt fragile, like a circuit held together by a single wire. The CEO stood at the room's edge, his arms crossed, his face unreadable, but his eyes betraying a storm of their own. He'd built NexGen on control, on burying the vulnerabilities of his past, but this girl had cracked something deeper than code. She'd exposed a truth he'd long avoided. He remembered Leela's fire, her defiance, and how he dismissed it, thinking it a liability. Now this child had done what he couldn't. She'd listened. He cleared his throat, his voice low but carrying weight. You didn't just fix the system, he said, stepping forward, his polished shoes clicking against the tile. You changed the game. The girl looked up, her eyes wary but steady, her notebook clutched like a shield. I just followed the trail, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Someone needed to. The intern, emboldened, stepped closer, his voice earnest. You didn't just follow it, you rewrote the ending. That was incredible. She shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise, her mind still tangled in Leela's words, wondering if the hacker was watching, waiting for what came next. The room's silence broke as the woman with glasses spoke, her tone softer, almost reverent. We need to know how you did it, she said, setting her tablet down, her earlier sharpness gone. Not just the code, the thinking. She hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her notebook, where a new sketch had begun. A web of lines connecting nodes like stars, a map of the system's soul. It's not about the code, she said, her voice gaining strength. It's about what it's saying. Leela, was telling a story. I just answered it. The CEO's brow furrowed, a flicker of something personal crossing his face, as if her words had stirred a memory he'd long avoided. A story? He asked, his voice quieter now, almost vulnerable. What kind? She met his gaze, unflinching. The kind you tell when you've been forgotten. The kind that hurts. The moment hung heavy, the room's air charged with unspoken questions. The CEO turned away, his jaw tight, and walked to the glass wall, staring out at the city's twinkling lights. He saw his reflection, but it wasn't the man he'd become. It was the boy he'd been, fixing radios in a foster home, dreaming of a world that would see him. He'd forgotten that boy, but this girl hadn't forgotten herself. He turned back, his decision made. I want you here, he said, his voice firm but softer than before. Not as a guest, as part of this. The intern's eyes widened, and he glanced at the girl, his voice urgent. You hear that? They want you on the team. She blinked, her fingers tightening around her notebook. What does that mean? She asked, her tone cautious, as if testing the offer for hidden traps. The CEO stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. It means you get to build things, not just fix them. And yes, break them too, if that's how you learn. Her mother appeared at the door, summoned by a nervous assistant, her face pale, her cleaning smock still dusted with lint. She froze, seeing her daughter at the center of the room, surrounded by adults who looked at her, not with disdain, but with awe. What's happening? She asked, her voice trembling, her hands clutching her cart. The woman with glasses stepped forward, her voice gentle. "Your daughter saved us. She stopped something we couldn't." The mother's eyes filled with tears, her hand rising to her mouth. She's always been like this," she whispered, her voice breaking, "taking things apart, putting them back better." The girl looked at her mother, a silent understanding passing between them, a bond forged in quiet nights and shared struggles. She turned back to the CEO, her voice steady. "If I stay, I want to make things that matter," she said. "Not just for you, for people like her." She nodded toward her mother, who let out a choked sob, tears spilling freely now. The CEO nodded, his throat tight. "You will," he said, his voice almost a vow. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a badge, not a temporary pass, but a permanent one, its surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "This is yours," he said, sliding it across the table. "Whenever you're ready." She picked it up, her fingers tracing the embossed letters, her heart pounding with a mix of pride and fear. She wasn't just a shadow anymore, she was seen. The room fell quiet, not the silence of defeat, but of something new, something alive. The intern grinned, his voice breaking the stillness. "You're gonna shake this place up." And for the first time, she smiled, small but real. The CEO turned back to the window, his reflection softer now, as if he'd found a piece of himself in her victory. And somewhere in the vast digital dark, Lila Voss's echo lingered, a reminder that brilliance could heal as much as it could harm. The girl tucked the badge into her pocket, her notebook still under her arm, ready to write the next chapter, not just for herself, but for everyone who'd ever been unseen. The story of a young girl saving a tech empire with her self-taught brilliance teaches us that genius often hides in the overlooked corners of the world. Her triumph shows that true potential doesn't need a title or a spotlight. It thrives in curiosity, resilience, and the courage to speak when no one else will listen. She didn't just fix a system, she challenged a world that ignored her, proving that even the smallest voice can rewrite the rules. This tale reminds us to look beyond appearances, to value the unseen, and to nurture the sparks of brilliance in everyone. It's a call to recognize the power of those who dare to dream in silence. Want more stories that inspire and captivate? Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to join us on this journey of discovery. Your support fuels our mission to bring heartfelt tales like this to life. Drop a comment below. What lesson resonated with you most? Let's keep the conversation alive and stay tuned for the next story that will spark your imagination.